Hi and welcome to the Hytro Performance Podcast, where we talk all things training and BFR. And today we're speaking to James Hudson down at Gloucester Rugby. James, how you doing?
I'm good, thank you.
For those that don't know you, do you want to just introduce yourself briefly?
So my name is James Hudson. I'm a performance nutritionist primarily, but I'm also in charge of sports science around recovery here at Gloucester Rugby.
So last season, we know that Gloucester did a heavy amount of BFR research on our behalf. It was really exciting to see. Can you very briefly, for non-sport scientists, explain what you did and what that entailed?
Yes, so we looked at how the preconditioning effect of using the BFR before they did some of the training sessions through pre-season affected the results of in-sessions. So we looked at one project around more of sport-specific prowler pushing, kind of short, intense bursts of prowler push with heavy resistance. We looked at how repeatable the athletes were around that, but then with the preconditioning we saw that by the later reps in the sets they were able to move that object quicker over time, so we saw an improvement in their endurance, their power endurance over those sessions. We also looked at the effect of BFR in combination and with and without heat around weight sessions as well. So we looked at when they were doing heavy lower limb resistance training sessions, and we saw some really interesting results around improvements in bar speed, so how quickly the velocity of the bar in terms of what they were moving in a squat movement when they'd done the preconditioning, but also then around how heat might have an effect on their perception of effort as well. So we took some really nice pieces to use and apply with the group.
And was there anything in there that subjectively you felt was really strong, that there was even just some anecdotal feedback from players?
Yeah, definitely. I think when players were feeling sorer and more tired during the season, they appreciated how they felt when we actually did the research. So I think when players did understand what the benefits were around using the BFR pre-session, they might then incorporate that into their routines. And I suppose where we've tried to move things is moving the idea of recovery as it's not just those first couple of hours after a session, it's actually the whole 24 hours, 36 hours before they maybe then do that exposure in the gym or on the field. So how they time those little interventions to improve how they can then perform is hopefully now viewed as a round the clock thing. It's not just for a couple of hours after a session.
And how much has that shift in mindset been mandated by yourself or the club, and how much have you seen maybe a change in habitual recovery with athletes?
I'd like to think it's been pretty habitual in that we've probably, you know, there's a certain time when you need to hold the athlete's hand and you need to guide them through incorporating certainly some new things like using the BFR into their current recovery strategies so that they can change that mindset and understand that it can be used at other times. It's got lots of different applications and it can fit alongside certain modalities, so how they can fit that into their routines and then develop their preferences as well. So it's not going to be the same for everybody. Some athletes are going to prefer different ways of using it, but that's the nice thing of being able to incorporate it across the board.
So you've taken time out of a very, very busy pre-season schedule to speak to us today. So what would typically a week now look like for you guys? Where are we in the training block? What are the things you're training for?
So we're in block 2 of pre-season, so they've got 2 days a week where they're going to get a really heavy lower limb resistance training session done. One day is going to be a bit more lower intensity, more kind of walk and talk installation of some of the technical, tactical aspects of the rugby, and then another day is going to have more of a power focus and speed focus. So those 2 days of the week we can use different ways to recover from that resistance training, and then they've got 2 big days of really extensive hard rugby where it's just, you know, it's pre-season, it's long sessions, it's building their volume and their capacity of their running ability over these next weeks before they enter games. So they've got 2 days of the week there. They've got a recovery day in the middle, and they've got a nice pattern to the week so they can see the end in sight every day.
And then culturally, is there a brand of pre-season training? I mean, a lot of clubs have traditions during pre-season, and you know, we'll definitely dial up physicality over rugby. What is it here at Gloucester? What's it that you guys stand for?
I think it's you know, our head of performance, Dan Tobin, does a fantastic job in giving the players a really clear, you know, guideline to what the purpose of each day is, and how that builds towards ultimately the game model and how we want to play as a team. So the players understand how the rugby wants to be played, and then how that work throughout pre-season is going to change block by block, and how that's actually going to allow them to perform that game model. So I suppose generally the forwards are going to be focusing a lot now as we get closer to gameplay around their set piece, around scrum, maul, technical aspects of line out, as well as improving and increasing that running capacity. And the backs are now at that point where they're really starting to try and move fast. So they've done a lot of that strength work through the first block, and they're really pushing now towards trying to hit those maximal speeds and accelerations as well.
So often when you speak to athletes, pre-season is dreaded, right? And it's where they pay penance for their 2 weeks they've had off or whatever. But you might get a few that maybe come in and see it as hopefully improvement in performance, right?
Yeah.
So is there anything that you would advise coaches going through pre-season training, mistakes to avoid? Like, it's not all just about packing on as much muscle as you can in the pre-season, because you already talked about being able to do volume and endurance. So what are you seeing that you think coaches need to be doing better in pre-season?
I think what the players here are really lucky, I see them as being really lucky with the guidance they're given, is that it is having a real definite goal of each day. You're not just trying to, I say back in the day, get my rose tinted glasses on. It did feel sometimes when you were doing pre-season 10, 15 years ago that it was just about getting flogged. It was just attritional, get through the volume, make sure you've done it. But now with the understanding and the technology around GPS and the understanding that we can really measure those internal and external factors around training, it is about defining the goal each day. So you can't train at high volume every day. You have to reduce volume and then manipulate intensity through a week. You have to be able to let players focus on that gym work to get the most from it and not confuse, the adaptations in their body where, you're saying get bigger and stronger, but we're also going to do too much volume to limit that. So it's definitely about, right, what is the day's purpose and the focus, and how does that fit together through week by week to produce the end product and ready to play a game.
So one of the things that we try to do across everything at Hytro is, with help from our partners, is simplify the science of BFR. One part of our mission is to just help people understand and apply it more. I can see you're wearing 3 different devices around, the watch as well, I'm assuming.
Yeah, watch.
So, that's obviously something important to you personally. Is it something that is important to the club as well, around data capture and constantly, I guess, measuring performance?
I think, personally, this is kind of a bit of personal training inference and interest in where kind of my activity burns, but definitely where we will monitor the wellness of the group, so we will look at how they're feeling. So it's about taking some of those internal and external measures, how much high speed distance have they run, what intensity has there been in the session, what's their heart rate telling us about how hard they found the sessions, and relating that back to then the planned sessions, and also subjectively how they feel. So are they what's their RPE for the session? That's a really good easy marker, but is it where we want it to be? Are they getting the right feel from each session as well? When it's hard, are they feeling that it's hard? And when it's meant to be easier, we want to make sure that it is, and is their body also telling us that? So that's where we would monitor that. But coupled with the wellness element, we'd look at how their soreness is feeling, how ready to train they are each day, and make sure that we're relating that back to how what we've exposed them to as well. So we can make sure that we are sticking to a plan, and it's being checked every single point throughout the pre-season blocks.
When you're planning pre-season training for a large group, right, and very different levels of athleticism, physical needs, coaching needs as well, I imagine. How much of it is, this is what we're doing, and it's written in pen, and how much is it in pencil that you have to make bespoke to athletes?
I suppose I'm probably a little bit further down the ladder from getting to make those decisions, but a long way down the ladder. But I think first and foremost, when you're talking sport specific, the changes that the coaches want to make in terms of how the game's going to be played take the priority. That is the end product. That is how the players want to play. But the physical capabilities obviously underpin the ability to do that. So I think it's Dan will always definitely have a real bit of clarity in terms of how we want the players to be able to play, and then understand where they need to be physically. And obviously there'll be individual needs to that. There'll be, during the first block of pre-season, we definitely looked at, are there some players in the group who need to have more aerobic capacity, right? In which case we're going to do a bit more work with them, working in those zones of work, and we're going to increase the load of that through the first block, where maybe rugby's not quite as dominant, and we can give a bit more physical prep. And then once we get into block 2, the rugby does very much take over in terms of the technical, tactical aspects of it, moving towards gameplay. So in that periodised way, the priorities shift, but the individual priorities will be across certain positions and certain groups that will then ultimately always complement the game model. That's how it's got to be.
So we've heard already around you, but also as I guess in the modern game, needing to be able to track and capture more data. Hopefully being able to tailor plans to athlete needs. How important is it as a coach to continually be innovating? It's easy for us as a brand product, but for you as a coach, how much is the science is the science, and how much is this quest for innovation in what you're doing?
I think when it is a quest for innovation, it's never to be doing something different for the sake of it. I think that's really important, is when you do introduce something into a routine, into the group, is you have to make sure the foundation is evidence-based. So, with the BFR, there's so much published research around the use and application with, as many athletes will have experienced it when they're injured or when they've got restrictions. And then I think where it is building is definitely around how we can complement and use that with recovery as well. And that's definitely where we've looked to incorporate it, is more on that recovery side as well. Players have used the garments when they are injured, or if they've got specific things. We've had some really nice case studies where, maybe players have got knee tendon issues during the season, and some of the S&C coaches and physios have used the BFR prior to, say, squatting, because they can then squat pain-free. Nice ways of being able to use it in a whole various different ways, but the priority has always been around that recovery side of things. So I think we are looking to be innovative, but we're also looking to make sure, I think, that the time that we spend with athletes in directing the recovery protocols is that we're being as kind of impactful as possible. So it's not a long, great big list. It's really pointing them in the direction of, right, how do you feel? How do you need to feel? I'll always prioritize, right, what are the adaptations we're trying to get from a training session? So that's especially during pre-season, that's a really important factor. And in season, that's still really important to maintain performance. So what is the adaptation we're after? How can we maximise and complement that in what recovery modalities we do? So periodising that across a training week is really, really important, because if you just give athletes a big, long list of things they could do, it's a bit of a pick and mix. You're going to just have potentially athletes then picking things which might actually negate some of the things they've just done in the gym. They might actually do more harm than good in how they do it, but they feel good, but they're not actually complementing what we're trying to achieve. So that's where it's really important that we guide them with really good evidence base, but then it's also how we can compound the impact of that as well.
So you touched on it briefly there. Do you think how you use BFR in pre-season, and predominantly for recovery, may change as the season kicks off?
Yeah, I think what I'm really, where the innovation comes in, I think, with BFR is that it has got that application across different modalities. Yeah. So we've already got pillars in place around, the big example being hot and cold, right? When do we want to use heat? When do we want to use cold? Where is it going to promote adaptation or negate adaptation? And where is it going to promote the athlete feeling ready to go and perform on the weekend?
Is that an example where you've had athletes of picking the things off the wrong list, where everyone knows it's on trend to jump in an ice bath? Yeah, actually, it's going to blunt your adaptation and so.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I think that's maybe where I've tried to evolve things, is that the kind of points-based systems that maybe would be quite commonplace for a long time, where you give athletes that pick and mix selection and say 20 points for this, 10 points for this, is that can get, the noise of that can get lost then with the specifics. So the way we'll try and organise things is that there will be daily specifics, so they are targeted recovery modalities which complement the training but also will promote, say, a reduction in soreness or the feel, but most importantly it's still promoting the adaptation we want from the training session. Where BFR comes into that is that we can almost amplify and get more bang for your buck in that time by using that modality alongside it to get an even better result in terms of feel and reduction in soreness, but we're not negating that. So we're not, like you say, players going, I've just done a really big leg session, I'm really sore, I'm going to be sore tomorrow, I'll go and sit in the ice bath for 10 minutes, and you go, no, you are literally putting water on the bonfire of what we've just done in the gym. So we've spent a long time over the last probably 2 to 3 seasons, hopefully the players understand where those priorities lie. And now over the last season and into this season, where we can use the BFR is to complement those modalities and then further get that improvements in areas like soreness and in that ability to then feel ready to go and do it again. And again, it's across that whole 24-hour period. It's not just what am I going to do in the first hour after a session. It's like, well, where does this fit in over the next 24 hours until I go in the gym again or get back on the field?
So Gloucester Rugby is known for having really strong team culture. And whilst we know pre-season isn't all about being at the pain cave, it is tough. So how do you cultivate that kind of team bonding and make sure everyone's helping each other through this tough training block?
I think the players have done a really good job. I think George Givington at the top has done a really good job in driving that this pre-season as well. But the players have responded, and they're trying to make sure they're enjoying all of the time they spend here every day. So it's that. I think it's probably, I can't really speak on behalf of the players entirely, but I definitely get the feeling that the idea is that when it is time to go to those dark places and put the hard work in, that they understand the purpose of it and they understand why it's there, and they know it when it is as well. It's not every day, so they can understand that it is those particular times of the week. But then the rest of the time away from that, they've got fantastic facilities and an environment around them to enjoy themselves. They've got fantastic team room, team space, and the players have made a real effort to make sure that they are both enjoying the downtime in between it, but enjoying their time together during, like you say, what is a hard work period.
Would you be comfortable to tell us any of the players who are most dedicated to training?
We're really lucky. I mean, obviously, Captain Lewis Ludlow is phenomenally dedicated in the example that he sets to the group. But you've got guys like Ollie Thorley as well. Is very on it with his recovery and how he makes sure he prepares every single day. We're lucky. We've got a number of guys who have been in the building for a number of years now who, again, stressed by the coaching team and performance team in terms of the importance of how they look after themselves. So, yeah.
Europe was a really successful campaign for you last year. Is there anything that you did differently around preparing, training for that you're going to take into this year as well?
I have to be careful what I say to the response to that. It was a really mixed year. Obviously, it was a very much the periods of really tough weeks in the Premiership. I think Europe gave the players a break from that sort of physical, but also more the mental stress of the week to week in the Premiership, and they gave them a shift in focus, which was fantastic. And it's then obviously for those games you've got different challenges. So for me, dealing with hotels and chefs in different countries is always fun because I can fully see that they read the menus and do it. No, but so it's I suppose it's preparing. So we took a lot of time around making sure that Chef here, Johnny and James, they did a fantastic job of making sure that the food prep for travel was spot on, that players had what they needed the whole way through, but also then that we could do some recovery on the move as well is a really big bonus using the BFR, because when you're on the bus for 12-18 hours after a game and you're taking a long time on flights as well to come back, having something which you can actually use on the move is a really big bonus as well. So a number of the players would use the BFR on the bus journey, on the planes and coming back, and making sure that they're doing something positive with their recovery in the period they've got after the matches.
Without giving away any of the plans for this season, do you physically prepare significantly different for the domestic games and the European games? I mean, different teams, different body sizes, obviously different game plan. Does that actually affect how some of the groups of players physically prepare as well?
I don't necessarily think it does week to week. I think there's probably some determinants, again, well above my decision-making points, but around selection, they probably are. There's some probably more specific selections against some teams because there is some very different style of rugby. But again, the Premiership is such it changes year on year, and you look at last year. Last year there was a big shift. I think a lot of teams maybe embraced playing a little bit more rugby, and I think the teams which saw success definitely were some of those teams. I think where maybe Gloucester and the players had some good success in the previous years had been such good strength in set piece, but actually the way in which the Premiership shifted last year, there was probably more put into playing a little bit more rugby, and there was less focus around set piece. So you have to evolve your game model with how the game is changing, because it does maybe not evolve, but it revolves year on year, and different things become the more kind of more salient points within the games. Some years defences are massively dominant, and some years teams who have a really strong set piece and focus on that are going to be dominant. So you have to be able to play in a whole variety of different ways with the squad that you have, but you've also got to evolve the game to be able to do that. And I think that's probably where the physical focus will be shifting this year. Yeah.
Do you see that in the evolution of the game, where you're absolutely right, pendulum swings, right? Just like size or speed, like.
Yeah.
But like we spoke earlier about younger players coming through, maybe more professional mindset, maybe more mature on how they're doing things.
Yeah.
Are you seeing that like across the board?
Yeah, I think that the probably the pressure and that it's a numbers game. These guys who come out of school now at 18, 19, they've come from a group of thousands, and they're coming and they're getting an opportunity. So I think they're really intense, intense in terms of their approach to things and wanting more and more information and knowledge, which is great. And you've just got to make them realise that it is all part of that puzzle to help them be the best rugby player, because it is rugby that counts. It's not just what you can lift in the gym. It's not just how fast you run. Your GPS tells you how fast you run. It's all these things are to enable them to do the best, the things they're really good at as rugby players, more and more on the field. So if they can express themselves as rugby players on the field, that's the end result that we want to try and do. So however we can do that and help support them, that's the main.
And then finally, if you could give one piece of advice to athletes thinking about integrating BFR into their pre-season training, so maybe outside of their coaching environment, some athletes that haven't made it to a top level, what would you say to them? Incorporate
into sessions around your existing modalities. I think that's the brilliant thing is it's not, it can stand alone and have a really, it's really effective as a standalone method. But where I think that way of including it across the week and across all of your, your training weeks is that it can sit alongside heat, cold, active and passive recovery modalities. So it's not just a passive one, it can be incorporated into other ways as well. So you can have it as something which is an extra tool in your box, but it can sit alongside all of those other elements. It hasn't got to be thought of as something standalone. It definitely has that ability to be with other forms as well. So beyond BFR, is there any other modalities or techniques that you're building into the training for the guys that are interesting for listeners? I think it's probably not anything new, but it's definitely how we try and structure things. So I think I mentioned points-based schemes have got a place. When you're trying to embed modalities into a group of players, into a squad, they've got a real nice motivation and incentive for players to go and do it. It's a really nice way of laying things out so players can accumulate that recovery over different days. But I think where I've definitely tried to move things to is that periodized approach, but then also then making sure they understand it's a running clock. It's not just what I do in that first 2 hours after a session or first hour immediately afterwards. It's almost then taking, and I'll shamelessly giving, I've ripped off other people's things, but Dr. Peter Tierney, who came up with the SHIT protocol or framework, I think that's a brilliant way of thinking about it. And I've tried to take that and then almost ask the question to athletes, like, what should I do first? So what's my priorities around that? Do I feel fatigued or irritable, or do I feel stiff, or do I feel we've kind of manipulated that acronym and just posed the question to the squad of like, well, how do you feel? What do you need to do first in a day? So it's not right. I did, like we'll talk about with the specific strategies. It's not, I've been in the gym and done my lower limb legs, so I'm going to go and sit in the sauna. I'm going to do my BFR and I'm going to do some breathing exercises, because that's the, we're going to get 3 things in there, really nice package in 17, 20 minutes, done. That doesn't finish there. It's like, you're then going to go and sleep. You're then going to wake up the next morning, and if you feel tight, sore, irritable, fatigued, what are you going to do to remedy that before you go back in the gym or before you then go into the field? So where do the modalities sit there that are going to be able to affect how you can then present to training, because that recovery is continuous. Is when you wake up until you start that first session, you've still got maybe 3 hours there. So what can you do in that 3 hours to recover further? Because ultimately recovery for me is the ability of the athlete to re-enter the training and either meet or exceed their previous levels of performance. It's not just how they it's not, I feel good, so I'm going to be able to, it's like, well, actually, can you go and lift that extra bit of weight in pre-season that we've got programmed for you, or can you go and meet the running needs that we're trying to target in that session? Can you then do more, and in which case have you recovered in that block? So what can you do in the mornings? And if you are feeling stiff, if you're feeling sore or tight, how does that fit together? Is it then going and doing some more heat BFR? Is it doing some flexibility, mobility? What modalities can you use to specifically target how you feel? And that becomes more individualized, and it's not just accumulating points, it's targeted techniques that's really interesting. Through. So could just be that I haven't spoken to enough people, but we've seen so even ourselves with Ellie Mabry, we've got a 1 game week and a 3 game week periodization table of how to use BFR based on the typical objective needs of the body, when to cool down, when you might need ice, when you're recovering, when you're looking for adaptation or something.
But actually what you're saying is there's that, which is more the science, and then you've got like the bespoke bit around, I love this idea of what do I do first. So then it's not just here's a list of things you could do, I don't know what you're actually going to pick. It's also not like, okay, you have to do A, B and C. We want to do all of it. Yeah. But you let the athlete decide the priority based on some guidelines, or? Yeah,
so just trying to get, so we will have those specifics. So those periodized specifics are, heat, cold, the use of BFR around those. It might be on some days, it might be to go and get some in the pool and be active, or so there will be specifics that we will ask them to do. But in that running clock attitude, where I want to get, I'm not saying they're there now. I'm saying we're trying to move them towards this pace where the individualization comes from their understanding of what is going to affect them and how they can put that into their program. So it's not just that scattergun of, well, here's like 20 things, just go and actually have the self-awareness to go, actually I'm feeling quite sore. I could go and do these 2 or 3 things this morning before I then enter the gym or before I start the day. That's going to improve my soreness. Or even at the end of the day, I'm still feeling really sore, right? I'm going to pick these over these other modalities, because that's going to help me come through into that next session. So it's not just right. Hytro says I've got to go and sit in the ice bath for 10 minutes.
Yeah, you do have to do
you
that.
Do,
but also,
but then what are you going to do tomorrow morning when you get up and you've got a skills session and something else at 9 o'clock? You come in for breakfast at 7:30. What are you going to do in that next hour and a half? You're going to get some treatment. Are you going to go and get in the sauna and do some mobility? Are you what's going to trigger that decision-making process that you can then, because then that's about building routine. I think routine is one thing, but it's the difference between a routine and a pattern. So a routine is, I'm just going to do that because it's that day. Or Hytro said I've got to do this today. That's just my routine. So routine's important, but a pattern is self-prescribed, and it's determined by how you feel or by other factors. And that's where I'd like to start developing the thought process. I'm not saying we're there, but hopefully we're gradually moving towards that, where they can incorporate modalities based on that, not just on routine.
I love that analogy of running clock of recovery. It's not just this bit after the game or this bit after the workout. It's continual. Could you just touch on a bit more on the introduction of breathing techniques and breathing exercises? I think that's really interesting, and maybe not what many people would presume was part of pre-season training.
I mean, again, it's something where you want to try and get as much impact, after those lower limb sessions. I think when you're in a period of training where you're lifting heavy, the guys are going to be lifting above that 90% sort of threshold, and it's incrementally getting heavier each week till they hit those, to those targets. So they know that there's going to be another 2.5, 3, 4, 5 kilos added to the bar every week, which is right. That's planned brilliantly by the strength coaches, and that's fantastic. But we've got to kind of make sure that we're promoting the recovery of their nervous systems as well. So we want to activate that parasympathetic nervous system to try and get them to relax and come back down after they've lifted heavy, because ultimately we want them to sleep well. We want them to sleep really well at night, and we want them to come in feeling refreshed and ready to go. So how can we what else can we do whilst they're going to be doing some BFR, they're going to be doing 5 minutes of occlusion after they've come out of the sauna. Actually, if we can do that while we're lying still doing some focused breathing, if that then helps that nervous system come down and they can then leave the building feeling a bit more refreshed and relaxed, it's going to promote sleep. And some players will maybe, as the season develops, will use that in the evenings before bed. It might be something that they struggle with, that wind down process. And so by doing it with them in sessions around the gym, we might not be able to hold their hand all the way through the season, because we want them to do it themselves as well. But they might choose that actually that's something they find more impactful closer to bedtime. But at least then we've given them a taste of something else which can be incorporated into what they do, and it's hopefully promoting that
running clock recovery as well, right?
Exactly. So they don't have to do it in routine. They can build a pattern that suits them.
And then we'd like to close out on one question in particular. So you have to dig deep and get your best advice out. In your mind, what is the difference between a good and a great athlete?
It's doing the uncoachable things consistently. So it's doing the things which don't require hours of intervention and coaching, and being motivated. It's just doing the things the little pieces, which if you do them consistently, they add up very quickly to what you do every day. It's not being, you can't be inconsistent with things. You can't pick something up and kind of do it 3 days out of 7. You've got to view things as, you've got to pick the tools you're going to use, and you've got to commit to use them and be consistent with them. So and they're not coachable things. They're not things that you need someone standing over you telling you to do this or directing you to do it. They're the things like just having good discipline around bedtime routine so you sleep well. It's having the understanding of when you're not at a training ground or being provided with food that you've thought about, or when am I going to eat, what am I going to have, where am I going to get it from? It's those things that we can help them understand that, but if they go and do it consistently and have good practices around those, then you see the difference in some of the young players. Within 6-8 months, they've just made a big shift in their ability to be a player at that level. Yeah.
Cool, James, that was amazing. Thanks for your time. I appreciate it's very, very busy. It's a great episode here down at Gloucester. Thanks for listening. Make sure you tune in, subscribe so you don't miss any of the next ones.